Parent of a weird kid, how did you react when you realized that your kid did weird creepy stuff? My son has said that when he kills someone he'll put their body on the train tracks so no one will know they were murdered. And then he said if anyone saw him he'd have to put their body on the train tracks too. He was 6. I embrace his dark side. It'll help out a lot in the future zombie invasion. If he doesn't somehow cause it, that is. Out of the blue, my 4-year-old daughter tells my wife, "Mommy, when you die, try to stay asleep. It's easier that way." My kid has been the weird kid since about 2 years old. His favorite bedtime stories were the user manuals to my appliances. At 3 he became obsessed with human biology and would watch open heart surgeries on YouTube. He was also obsessed with vacuums. For 4 years, he would spend hours in department stores demonstrating to shoppers how to use them. At 5, his summer plans was to teach himself mechanical engineering and physics. I could go on. When he turned 3 is when I started to suspect he was different. It scared the frick out of me. He was my firstborn so I had no idea if he was developing normally or not. His thirst for knowledge became extreme and I didn't understand how to handle him. So at 4 I sent him to a child psychologist. I was terrified my son would have a nervous breakdown because although he was so young, he never once in his life, played. All he did was learn. The psychologist made it clear to me that he was gifted, but that I had to force him to play, otherwise he would develop OCD and other disorders. He is 8 now, and still different, but he does play. Sometimes, I'm happy he is who he is, but I can see that he has a difficult life ahead of him. He doesn't have many friends, mainly because he would rather discuss the news than some new game or toy. I can say this though, I don't think I'll ever meet another human being who is anything like my son, and I love that about him. My wife's son, from a previous relationship, is 12 years old and ever since I've known him, since he was 5, still won't talk in a normal person voice or volume, if that makes any sense. He will talk in all sorts of weird overly animated voices or tones. I ask him to stop talking like that but I truly don't believe he could if he tried. He is pretty introverted with anxieties we are working on but that is the weirdest thing. My only reaction to that is it's hard to take anything he says seriously. I have a hard time wanting to have conversations with him because it bothers me that I don't get a solid answer out of him or feel like we could have a real conversation. After working with him for so long to try and remedy it I feel defeated sometimes. The little boy my grandma took in is really creepy, but no one else sees it but me. He is obsessed with Five Nights at Freddy's and guns. He has so many toy weapons it's worrying. He also likes to tell me in detail how he is going to kill me and my grandma. All he does is sit at the computer and play Minecraft. He makes these really complicated machines to kill NPCs and then he laughs when they die. He also likes to attempt to get into the bathroom when anyone is doing anything in there, so he can watch. Maybe cut down on visits to grandma's house. Male cousin of mine, 12 years old, asked several of my female relatives and even my girlfriend if he could give them foot massages while we were on vacation, Lake Powell. It got to the point where he was very forward and pressing to give the foot massages and making people say number 3-4 times before moving on to someone else. I'm pretty sure he is on the autism scale, maybe Asperger's. Creepy nonetheless. With love, my daughter has Asperger's and is about to start her 2nd year in middle school. Middle school girls aren't known for their empathy, and while we've worked tirelessly for about 10 years to help her get along socially, it's exhausting for her, and she's probably the weird kid at school. She's got a small number of friends that will hang out with her individually, that is, not during school time, but gets them in a group situation at school and the larger social dynamic of middle school girls kicks in, and she's left out. So yeah, my daughter's the weird kid. She's also loving and funny and an honors student and into anime and Minecraft and theater. My youngest son is pretty weird, creative, funny, smart, but weird. Last year he was upset because it made him feel isolated. He has friends but he knows his mind works different from theirs. He isn't on the spectrum. He just makes intuitive leaps and mentally connects information in a way that isn't traditional. I reacted by crawling into his bunk bed with him and cuddling him. I held my 8-year-old and told him that being weird is okay. I told him that I was pretty weird myself and that while it meant that you wouldn't connect with everyone, the people you do find as friends are going to be true and amazing friends. I told him that being normal was boring and if anyone ever teased him for being different, then frick those kids because it isn't like these other people he is going to be hanging out with in 20 years. Then we arranged for some counseling so he could talk to a professional about it and be reassured that no one is as normal as they seem. Not a parent but a friend of mine is extremely weird and I wonder myself how his parents react. He has several weird tendencies. He absolutely refuses to get a smartphone. He has an old Nokia and even after we tell him eventually there will only be smartphones, he counters this by purchasing 100 of these phones on eBay just in case. He has no problem having one of us look stuff up on our smartphones though. He hates condiments and meat on sandwiches. When he goes to a deli he gets just bread and cheese, nothing else. He is terrified of alcohol. Once someone put vodka in a drink of his. He took one sip and had to go to therapy. He also still sleeps with one of those safety bars on a bed to prevent you from falling. He's 27. He's a good friend, just very different. I was changing in front of my daughter when she was around 2.5. She grabbed my boobs and said, "Mama, I like your boobs. They are pretty." I said thank you but told her not to touch other people's boobs. She can only touch her own. This resulted in full meltdown toddler mode. "I don't want to touch my boobs. I just want to touch your boobs." She still randomly tells me I have nice boobs and it weirds me out. My 3.5-year-old son is still constantly trying to get at my nipples. He's been weaned since he was 2, but he'll tell me at least once a week, "Mommy, I love your nipples." The worst is when we're out in public and he starts sticking his hand down my shirt. Weirdo. My mother considers me the weird one. The main thing she likes to talk about is my opossums. My dog Skit used to catch them and kill them. I'd give him a treat for that too. And I had read some books about the ecosystems that arose around decayed animals, but I could never see that like I did with other ecosystems. So I dug a hole, lined it with a plastic bag, because I thought the opossum would sink if I didn't, then buried the carcass on top of it. Then over the next several weeks I would dig it up, all geared too. I had gloves, mask, and goggles. Draw pictures of what critters I saw and the smell and how the dead opossums looked like. Then when all the flesh was gone I gathered up the bones, bleached them, then boiled them in a pot, and then buried them in my sand turtle. It's a sandbox shaped like a turtle, and pretended to be a paleontologist digging up an amazing ancient creature. They found the bones at that point and threw them away. My mother got me those wooden dinosaur skeletons but it just wasn't the same. Oh yeah, I was like 8 or 9. My daughter, age 5.5, is the weird kid in her class. She's odd in a number of ways. She's super smart, can read at an adult level, not exaggerating, and she's friendly towards other kids, but she just plays differently. She spends about 80% of her playtime pretending to be an animal. Usually it's one particular animal that she obsesses over for months, then she moves on to another. For well over a year, literally her entire world was chickens. Now she's moved on to guinea pigs. She also is very much into the darker, macabre side of life. She talks a lot about dead bodies, cremation, zombies, and the like. She enjoys spending time in the cemetery near our house and checking out the graves. She's also pretty unemotional about stuff that would really upset other children. She tells me she never misses me or her dad when we're not around, and she was the only one of us that didn't cry when we put our dog down recently. She told me I shouldn't cry so much because we all knew he was going to die soon. I think she's an amazing child and I love the heck out of her independent little spirit, but it definitely takes other kids, and adults, by surprise, and I wonder how she'll get on with other kids as she gets older. She's starting kindergarten next week. My friend has a friend who has a kid whose behavior is very concerning, at least when she tells me stories about this kid. He is 6 years old, and one day he had a play date with a girl and both parents were hanging out in the kitchen or whatever. He kissed this girl on the mouth after she told him not to and then physically covered her mouth so she couldn't tell on him. Obviously she did as soon as she was free. He also barged into the bathroom when my friend was at their house and going to the bathroom because he wanted to see her naked. It also doesn't help that A. His mom still wipes his butt for him. I'm being literal here. And B. She still showers with him because he doesn't know how to bathe himself and doesn't like being in the bathtub by himself. He is almost 7. I've never met this kid, only seen pictures, and I shudder every time I hear about him. I don't think he's going to be good at making friends, which makes me sad. I always knew my daughter was odd. She didn't relate well to others and sometimes seemed to be in her own world. A few years ago when she was 14 she read a book called Look Me in the Eye by an adult with Asperger's. After she read it she said she really related to the author and wanted to be tested. We went through a few rounds of tests and interviews with a neuropsychologist and she was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. My reaction was relief. It explained so much about her. All of those weird things seem normal when seen through the lens of autism. It's depressing. That's pretty much it. I get stressed out and depressed. My daughter is 7 and hates most everyone and everything when she so feels like it. So she'll be a bright and sunny happy normal kid, and then bam, she hates everything. She will attack anyone who tries to cheer her up. Don't try to cheer her up if you don't want a fist to the face. She hates food. She hates games. She hates all people, and so on. I've tried to get her therapy for this but everyone I call says that it's probably a fault of my parenting and that they won't see her but they will see me instead so I can learn how to parent. That kind of makes me want to punch them in the face. Maybe it's genetic. My son is not negative like his sister, but is also the weird kid. He's academically ahead and socially behind, along with forgetful and distractible. His vocabulary and speech habits are odd compared to other kids, smarter and yet completely out of touch with normal kid stuff, except when he gets wound up and all he wants to say is poop. He can't fit in with his peers because he is both too smart and too immature. I've also tried to get him therapy for this but apparently that doesn't exist. They told me to just let him be weird. Fine, if you don't want him to have friends. My daughter is fascinated with death. She likes to talk about it. It really creeps my husband out. Her imaginary friends would get run over and die all the time. But when she was in preschool the teacher passed around a box and they had to use their imagination to say what was in it. One kid is like a kitty, another says an ice cream cone. My daughter opens the box and says a puppy, but it's a dead puppy. The other kids were a little disgusted and one started crying. Your daughter is metal as frick. I was labeled weird in elementary school because me and my best friend were convinced we were dogs and our mission was to fight off the devil. Apparently, dogs were equivalent to angels. Also, we galloped around the playground on imaginary horses, or as we call them, Pegasus unicorns. As a creepy kid growing up I can't tell you what not to do. I spent most of my childhood silently watching people and catching bugs by myself. My mom had zero clue what to do with me so, although she was never anything but well-intentioned, treated me the same as my outgoing, overachiever older sister. She pushed me to join groups and do things and that made me withdraw even more from other people and she would be furious when I inevitably stopped going or hid, or ignored people and just read a book instead of whatever thing I was doing. Needless to say, that was not helpful for a kid already showing signs of a severe anxiety disorder, and when my dad died when I was 12 I felt like I also lost my only advocate and friend. I went into a shell that I wouldn't emerge from for a decade. It wasn't an easy way to grow up, and at 30 I still struggle with anxiety and avoid personal relationships, mostly because I didn't develop the social skills as a kid needed to make friends. I have no idea what I'm doing. Mom, who has mellowed considerably from when we were kids, actually apologized to me for the treatment. She did the best she could but realized that I would have probably benefited from support and encouragement more than anger. I also probably should have been seeing a therapist throughout childhood. C'est la vie I suppose, but I would highly encourage anyone with a weird creepy child to listen closely to them, avoid anger, and to not be at all shy about getting them to a therapist. My child is extremely acrobatic. When she was smaller, any attempts to control her were futile. I think she sent at least one other parent into premature labor when it looked like my daughter was going to fall from a high climbing structure. When she was around 4, she started to be aware of the effect she had on adults. I started to say, "Stop that, you're freaking people out," and she would stop. Now, at 9, her gymnastics coach is very enthusiastic about her. My daughter is super weird, not in a creepy way, but in the way that will most likely get her picked on as she gets older. We embrace it. Make sure she knows that being weird is not only okay, but a good thing. That is, makes her unique. When the day comes that she does get picked on, it's gonna suck for her. Not as much as us telling her not to be herself would though. Hopefully if we reinforce that is okay, and that she should be proud of it, she will brush off the mean things kids can say. The weirdest thing my nephew does, aside from his obsession with Lego, is hum or sing the Imperial March, O Fortuna, or Toccata and Fugue when he is pooping. My dad sometimes tells a story of a conversation I had with him when I was a toddler. I told him that I remembered heaven, along with all the dads that I could choose from before being born. I told him that he wasn't my first pick, but he seemed interesting and I wanted to give him a chance. My 3-year-old niece was visiting from out of state one summer. She randomly came up to me and said, "Come, I wanna show you something." I followed her into our kitchen where she walked over to the big freezer we had and opened it. Out jumped our cat. To this day, I still wonder what would have happened if she didn't tell me to come look, or being a 3-year-old just went and played and forgot all about it. My daughter, she sleeps with a toy Sock'em MK23 under her pillow. She shakes her fist at moths and shouts "curse you" as they fly away. She once told me, "Daddy, someday I'll be dead, but that's okay." When I told her horseshoe crabs had blood, she wanted to kill one to see. I fumbled the response and suggested she merely wound one instead. She likes shows like X-Files, Buffy, Goosebumps, and is really looking forward to the Evil Dead TV show. She is 5. My son is 12 and hasn't found out how to delete his search history yet. When he was out for school, I went on his laptop and checked his history out of curiosity. I found that my son has a very bizarre fetish for belly buttons. He searches up videos of belly button licking, punching, and even videos where women get shot in the belly button. Fake, of course, thank God. I don't think I will ever tell anyone I know, not even my husband, about this for as long as I'll live, since I don't want my son to feel devastated, and my son is fully functional and social, albeit a little shy when he meets new people. I just wanted this off my chest. I still love my son very much. When my oldest was 12, we were walking together and he was looking at a tree moving in the breeze. He told me that he sees music when he looks at things like that. He's a really talented musician but not so good in the personal interaction part. I love that kid regardless. Your child might actually see music, not in the figurative way, when the wind blows the trees. It's called synesthesia and is the brain associating one sensory stimuli with another. My son was diagnosed as autistic at 4 years old, and recently diagnosed with psychosis. He hears voices, including one that identifies itself as God. He was hospitalized for nearly 3 weeks this summer. I know he is and will continue to be the weird, creepy kid at school. I'm saddened that he will have to shoulder taunting and ostracism, but I love him to death. I wish that I could take away some of the strangeness, but I see that it is innate. I have to learn to help him deal and cope with it, as well as help my family adjust to these things. With denial. Then I had him and myself tested and discovered we are the neurologically atypical ones. Now we are appropriately aware and take precautions, meds, etc. It was okay, I guess. Still think all of you are the weird ones, secretly. My little brother is 10 and has always loved to rub and caress my mom's soft skin. Her arms mostly. I asked him how he felt about going back to school after summer vacation and he replies, "I wish I can take some of Ma's skin with me to school." He doesn't get to rub anyone's skin anymore. My daughter was 5 and I was walking her up to school. I pointed out all the seagulls on the school field. She said, "Seagulls are evil." Then, in a slightly creepy voice, she said, "Black badger, red rose and seagulls peck your soul, and you will walk in the woods and be always alone. For I will never love thee, no I will never love thee." So I said right and we went on in silence. Not my kid. but my niece crushed a baby chick to death with her hands on 2 separate occasions. She was almost 5. Because she was angry, she freaking put on latex gloves to do it a second time after she got angry. The sick freak. So that's one reason I refuse to take care of her. I don't care that she's just an innocent child. She just doesn't care about right or wrong. When I was waiting with my daughter at school for the doors to open, I watched another little girl trying to stomp on some ants. "They won't let me stomp them," she says exasperatedly to her dad. He looks over and says, "What? The ants? That's because they don't want to die, honey," and goes back to his phone. She looks at him, her eyes earnest, and says, "Yes they do. They said yes. They want to die." She was probably 3. I thought it was cute and funny, but it was also a little weird. I was a weird kid. I drew naked people all the time. At the age of 10, we were drawing Greek statues in class and I was the only one who actually drew a penis. It was Zeus throwing a lightning bolt with an erection and I didn't do it for comedy. I did it for art. They didn't hang it in the classroom with everyone else's. Instead, it was in a supply room. They said there wasn't enough room on the wall. I was seriously mad. My kid likes to stay at the basement with no lights, just sitting in a corner. I asked him why. He said, "Darkness gives me peace." I don't know if I need to soundproof the whole house so he would not go back in the basement or scold my kid. Getting killed while asleep is not high on my priorities. My 8-year-old stepson is incredibly smart but weird at the same time. He enjoys looking at YouTube videos. So one day hubby and I looked into the history of the vids he's been watching. He looked up what P was, and the next video on trying to find the answer of how big Hulk's comic book dong was. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.